Oh!
What you just watched and heard is a major gun battle that took place in the Arab city of Jenin in Samaria last week between the IDF and Hamas terrorists. The IDF went into the Arab city of Jenin to stop a major Hamas terrorist cell from executing massive terror attacks in Jerusalem and around the country that they were planning on carrying out. Thank God the IDF stopped this Hamas terror cell. As reported, the IDF launched raids that targeted a Hamas cell which killed 5 Hamas terrorists and prevented a major terror attack reminiscent of the Second Intifada. For those unfamiliar, the Second Intifada was back in 2002 when Hamas and Fatah terrorists, that's what Palestinian Authority terrorists, launched daily suicide bombings all across Israel, on buses, at restaurants, hotels, etc., murdering many innocent Israeli civilians just living life. The IDF operation, thank God, was a huge success, and it stopped a number of major terror attacks that they were planning. As reported, while security forces arrested some 20 militants belonging to the Hamas cell and confiscated guns, there are additional suspects who belong to the same cell who have not yet been arrested. So even with that raid in Jenin, the IDF believes that many of the terrorists still got away and are still at large. Yet, as the IDF Chief of Staff Kochavi said himself, the raid prevented significant terror attacks that could have taken place in Jerusalem, Netanya, Tel Aviv, Afula, and elsewhere in the country. 2 Israeli soldiers, an officer and a soldier, were seriously injured during one of those firefights that broke out in Jenin. We here in Israel are still praying for those soldiers' recovery even a week later. Yet, when you listen to the world media reporting about what happened, you come out thinking that Israel is the bad guy in that raid on the Hamas terror cell. So stick with me as I dissect the reporting the whole world heard about regarding this extremely successful IDF operation that saved many lives of innocent civilians. Folks, as you know, social media censorship is growing. The best way to support our video work for Israel is to subscribe to our video newsletter on pulseofisrael.com and to share our videos. If you are already a subscriber, then thank you. So right now I'm talking to you about one IDF operation from last week that stopped some major terror attacks from killing many and injuring many Israelis. What you don't hear about are the daily terror attacks that take place, whether stabbing attempts or rock throwings, etc. But yes, those terror attacks happen all the time. They're just not reported at all. So now let's see how Reuters reported the story of the IDF raid in Jenin to the world.
Israeli troops killed at least 4 Hamas militants in gun battles on Sunday, in raids against one of the group's cells in the occupied West Bank. That's according to an Israeli military spokesman who said an Israeli officer and a soldier were also critically wounded and 4 more Palestinians arrested. Israeli officials have long said Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip, intends to gain strength in the West Bank, so it can challenge its rival there, the Western-backed Palestinian Authority.
So far, so good. So far, the facts in this report are all true. But now let's continue.
This Palestinian resident of the village of Beit Anan heard the raid before dawn and says he saw soldiers carrying 2 bodies. The shootouts marked the most serious violence between Israel and Hamas since an 11-day Gaza war in May, and threatened to raise tensions in the West Bank and along the Israeli border with Gaza.
Hold on there. Did you notice how they just glossed over the fact about a 11-day conflict in May?
The shootouts marked the most serious violence between Israel and Hamas since an 11-day Gaza war in May.
And then blamed this IDF raid in Jenin as threatening to raise tension in the area?
And threatened to raise tensions in the West Bank and along the Israeli border with Gaza.
Well, first of all, let's remember that 11-day conflict in May. That is when Hamas and Islamic Jihad shot thousands of rockets into civilian communities in Israel, sending Israelis all over the country to the bomb shelters for 11 days. That is just one night from those crazy 11 days filled with thousands of rockets fired by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Israel. That was a total escalation by Hamas. But yet, the Reuters TV report just nonchalantly glossed over it. No blame on Hamas, no focus on how Israel had every right to defend herself and how Israeli civilians from the Hamas escalation back in May. Nothing, just glossed over it. And yet, this IDF raid last week threatens to raise tensions? No. We have terror every day. The ones who are threatening tension and threatening the lives of everyone are the Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Palestinian Authority terrorists actually terrorizing. Israel has every right to do everything necessary to catch, kill, and stop those terrorists before they commit any terror attacks. This is the problem with the media. They give all of our evil terrorist enemies a pass for their genocidal terror ways, and instead the media likes to blame Israel for everything. Guys, we are used to it. For decades we're used to it. With it all, we are proud of our IDF soldiers, and we give them 110% backing and support to do everything necessary to stop our enemies, despite the horrendous media coverage regarding anything we ever do to just try to protect ourselves and live life. God bless our soldiers, and God bless Israel.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.